I have to admit I thought it was hilarious. The slogan at the end of the commercial for Plan B was, "I got this." Seconds earlier, I had pointed out to my fiance's father that this was one of the reasons for the declining birth rate which he had read about in an article earlier. He announced the statistics: 30% decrease in births in the US and a continual decline in abortions. People aren't fucking, he concluded. I joked about the incel generation, but this is a small part of the story. My immediate conclusion was the rise of IUDs. Millennials are postponing everything except sex. Notwithstanding the growing number of us who lack the social understanding to communicate, either due to sheltered upbringings, insular lifestyles, and/or an uptick in autism rates, anyone who can manage to fuck is fucking immediately. Only deeply religious or emotionally precious people are concerned about protecting their virginity until marriage, and those people would have no friends or empathy outside of small radical communities if they held it against everyone who wasn't. We are exposed to sex earlier and more often than anyone ever before. My age found our dad's porn magazines and/or downloads, and depending on when we got the internet, we had sex constantly thrust in front of us whether we sought it or not. Many of us did, and the internet served any depth we wanted to travel into exploring sexuality at any age. Other teens and older pedophiles will be happy to indulge you to your level of content while trying to drag you deeper. Zoomers have largely grown up with social media as reality and sex as inevitability, but the rise in degeneracy has tapered off now that everyone with unique proclivities has found their kin. There will always be a steady stream of converts and expats, just as any religion in its infamy. Still, the most popular standpoint on sex among young people in America is to have as much sex as desired as safely as possible. While we remain majority in favor of monogamous relationships, the popularity of open relationships has continually risen with the reliable prevention of the worst aspects of screwing around, the risk of STDs and pregnancy. Young people in particular consider monogamy something to be pursued at a later date. Previous generations were encouraged to marry and have kids with someone as quickly as possible upon entering adulthood. But in a society with much greater broad understanding of psychology, we now encourage one another to search for someone they are comfortable with and test the waters for an extended period of time before committing, possibly finding ourselves in a succession of medium-term relationships over the course of our late teens and 20s or even 30s. Short, medium, and long-term relationships, regardless of the courting period, are typically highly sexual thanks to the prevalence of condoms and birth control, technologies which have allowed this generation to explore sex as a philosophical component of our lives from the outset and to minimize the impact it has on our lives beyond the emotional. Expediting this consideration ought to be an ambition of education in addressing the most negative consequences of this sexual culture. While it is great that adults seem to be taking fewer risks on having children in situations where they don't want them or don't consider themselves fit to take care of them yet, most people begin to experience sexual desire and begin accruing knowledge of the subject years before adulthood. The average age of first sexual encounter for Americans is 17. Obviously, for this to be the average, it must be extremely common to start earlier, and I think any American could tell you as much based on themselves or who they know. We receive very clinical sexual education in middle and high school, which mostly discourages sex altogether, but helpfully instructs on how to perform it safely nonetheless. It is inauthentic to pretend that this is all kids should know before having sex. It is only as much as we feel responsible for telling them while continuing to insist that just not doing it is the best answer, and that if they're going to do it, we don't want to hear about it. Considering how often these relationships may appear dangerous to their parents, the kids probably don't want their parents to hear about it either. But the fact of the matter is that most of those who can fuck will fuck, and moreover, a sizable number of us will be taken advantage of, gaslit, and raped by peers, family, and pedophiles, beginning our sexual lives in a dark place. What we need to teach is the psychological impact of sexual conduct. Assume that sex is likely to happen, and coach young people on how to handle it emotionally, how to identify and understand their own feelings, and to make informed decisions about their reasons for having sex, rather than just the safety of the act itself. The earlier that people can understand themselves, the earlier they can make decisions that best benefit themselves and live happier lives. It is obvious that entering happy relationships and raising children is still a prerogative in many people's lives, but has been slowed by their ability to take their time and explore. The less they need to learn, the more guidance they are given on how to find happiness and stability in life by way of new wisdoms and understandings which our experimentation has granted us, the more we can expedite the process for younger generations and help to keep them from experiencing the traumas which we encountered on our own roads to discovery. Wrote this back in November and never did anything with it as far as I know. So there you go.